Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Big Blonde and Beautiful, the podcast. If you're new here, my name's Karolina Howie, and each episode I pick a piece of media with fat representation in it. I talk about the positive and the negative, and overall, if I think it's positive or negative. This week, we're going to be talking about the horror/mystery movie, Ma, from 2019. In case you haven't heard of this movie, I'm going to give you a little synopsis so you're caught up. So, a lonely, middle-aged woman, Ma, played by Octavia Spencer, befriends some teenagers after buying them booze and decides to let them party in the basement of her home. But there are some house rules. One of the kids has to stay sober, don't curse, and never go upstairs. They must also refer to her as Ma. But as Ma's hospitality starts to curdle into obsession, what began as a teenage dream turns into a terrorizing nightmare. And Ma's place goes from the best place in town to the worst place on earth. So I know that this genre is typically one that I don't do very often. I'm not a big horror movie person, but I had this on my list to watch for a while. I don't know, something about it just intrigued me. And of course, I love Octavia Spencer. She's so talented. So I decided to give it a shot. And then I was like, oh no, I need to record another podcast episode. And I was like, well, why not do Ma? Because the lead character is a fat person. So it works out. Now we're going to get into my thoughts. There's Ma, who is obviously the character that we are talking about today. Again, she's played by Octavia Spencer. She is very obviously the villain of this film. She's deranged and trying to relive her high school experience with the children of the classmates who she went to school with. It isn't directly mentioned, but it is implied that she's left out for a few reasons. The biggest ones, though, are her weight and her race. She's, also kind of the nerdy loner, which plays a big part in how she's treated by her classmates and specifically the parents of these kids that she targets. So we've talked about fat villains on this podcast before, and you still might be thinking, why is it such a big deal that the fat person is the villain? Because someone has to play the villain, right? That is true. But what you're overlooking is there's a huge discrepancy in how many movies show fat villains and how many show like fat heroes or heroines. When I look up fat heroes, you know who popped up? Homer Simpson, Fat Albert, Fred Flintstone, characters like that, which I would not necessarily categorize Homer Simpson as a hero. I don't know enough about Fat Albert or Fred Flintstone to comment on that. Whereas if you look up straight-sized heroes, there's no end in sight to that list. You've got people like Wonder Woman, Iron Man, Superman, like so many iconic superheroes that are part of the Marvel and DC franchise are straight-sized. And while yes, there are a good amount of straight-sized villains as well, it feels more equally balanced or even more on the hero side in terms of what roles they're playing more often. When it comes to fat characters, there are way more villains. Images of Ursula, Jabba the Hutt, the Penguin, and so many more come to mind for me. At times, they even have straight-sized people wear fat suits to portray fat villains, like in Dune. And while there is no fat suit in this film, the portrayal of yet another fat villain is still harmful. Movies, whether we realize it or not, a lot of our perceptions come from them. For example, if you don't know any trans people and you watch Orange is the New Black, you might start to think that most trans people are like Laverne Cox's character, whether intentionally or unintentionally. This is why having a good balance of different characters for fat people and just minorities in general is so important. Fat villains reinforce this idea that fat people are lacking in morals. The fatter you are, the more moral failings you must have. As a fat person, I know that a person's size has nothing to do with whether or not they are a good person. But if you're someone who doesn't have close relationship with fat people, the media you consume is informing you on what to think about fat people, whether you are conscious of it or not. Which is why positive and accurate depictions of fat people are so important, because we've had so much negative fat representation that we have to, level the scales out, which means the pendulum needs to go the other way. For me, I would really love to see more fat heroes, more fat characters in general, where their fatness isn't talked about. I will say that in this film, it's not necessarily blatantly talked about, but it's kind of implied that Ma is jealous of the younger teen girls and how they look and how they're able to act around boys because they fit like the stereotypical pretty white girl role. But speaking of race, that's another important topic that we need to get into for this film. Obviously, I'm going to preface that I'm a white woman, and my knowledge of race is limited to the experiences that I've had. And even though I've done research for this show and research in general on my own, I know that my information is still lacking. As most things in America, fatphobia is built on race. And if you're like, oh my gosh, another thing linked to race, I dare you to try and find something in America that is not linked to race in any way. It is impossible. It's literally race and misogyny were what our country was founded on, and genocide. So, really lighthearted stuff. It's the reality. So, ignoring that is not going to make it better. It's just going to make it worse for minorities. It's not. Yeah. Anyway, like I said, fatphobia built on race. Fatphobia was yet another catalyst to separate whiteness from blackness. Fat really became a resource for racial categorization in the late 17th century. If you want a more in-depth detail about fatphobia and blackness, that's from a more educated resource, a more reliable resource than myself. I strongly recommend that you go read The Black Body, The Racial Origin of Fatphobia by Sabrina Strings. It is a very interesting read. I'm slowly making my way through it, and it's so important and so eye-opening. So I definitely recommend that you go check that out. Don't just take my word for it, obviously. There are lots of texts to support fatphobia, and it's linked to race. Through my research, I learned that much like fat representation, Black representation in film leaves much to be desired. The cinema doesn't offer a break from everyday struggles of Black people, much like it doesn't offer a break of the everyday struggles of fat people. Instead, it is constantly highlighting them, and with Black people, they like to throw a little white savior in there for fun. Ma in this film is seen as the outcast. She's sexually charged because of her past and the incident that happened with her and the boy that she liked. But she's also calculated and cunning. Like, you can't take away, even though she's unhinged, the lengths she goes to things. Like, she has a plan, and she's going to execute that plan. Whether it fails or not remains to be seen, but she's going to do it. And also, she isn't just this one-dimensional character whose actions are random. We kind of get a backstory where we are even able to, despite the horrific things that she does in the film, sort of empathize with her because of how she was treated. We see how a childhood of being excluded, being one of the only Black kids, being bullied, has manifested into this violent person that she's become. And she feels that by hurting the kids of her previous classmates, that she will get the validation and the experiences and just like the love and attention that she craves so much. Because that's really what she wanted, was she wanted to be included. She wanted to be respected. Instead, she gets humiliated and left out and teased, and it's just like not good. Obviously, the lengths that she goes to try and like correct this is insane. It's a horror movie. Duh. But we are able to, for a brief second, empathize with her and feel for her character and understand a little bit more of why she is acting the way that she's acting. In fact, it's really obvious that race plays such a part in this because at one point when she has all the kids drugged in the basement, she takes white paint and paints over one of the only black kids, his face. And she's like, there can only be one of us.
I'm sorry, Darrell. They've only got room for one of us.
Because, as we know, again, cinema educating us about life, the token black character has been around for forever and it still manifests in real life. Even she's aware that, like, there can't be more than one of us. And then also you could say that she shows, like, the fatphobia that she went through for one of the boys, he has, like, these abs, and I can't remember if she burns him or if she cuts it.
It comes effortlessly. Those perfect little touches. Perfect skin. Oh, that perfect skin. Perfect belly. Must be nice, most handsome.
And just like she wants to ruin his perfect body, she can be the only black person. One of the girls, she sews her mouth shut.
I need a man, huh? This ought to shut you up for once.
Because she's like, she never stops talking. So I was like, what? That's crazy. And then the child of the guy that she was obsessed with in high school, he does die. She's also kind of obsessed with the son, despite the fact that she's a grown woman. But I also feel like, you know how they say when you're traumatized, your mind stays the age that you were traumatized at? I really think that is playing a role in this because she sees herself as one of their peers. Yes, she has a motivation to be like cool and let them hang out in her basement and buy them booze, but I truly think that a large part of it is she was traumatized at the high school when they, pulled that prank of her giving who she thought was the guy that she liked a BJ in the closet, and then she walks out, the whole class is there, including the guy that she thought, and out walks this other guy.
Hello?
Over here. Close the door.
Was I good?
Yeah. Let's get out of here.
Okay. Ben?
Surprise! Oh god, that took forever. So, how was she? Was she good?
It was fucking awesome.
So I definitely think that she remained the age mentally that happened at. All right, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. Is this movie positive fat representation or negative? For me, I know that I'm not a big horror person, so I might be a little biased, although I didn't hate the movie. I made it through it, which is better than other horror movies that I've tried to watch. But I am gonna say negative. Obviously these movies aren't meant to make you feel warm and fuzzy. Like, that's not the genre. But, and of course, Octavia Spencer's performance, incredible. I would expect nothing less of her. She's amazing. My thing is, there is such an imbalance in fat villains and fat heroes. We need to let the villains rest for a while. We need more fat heroes. And until we start getting that, we need to stop saying that fatness is immoral by casting fat actors as villains. It's just, it needs to stop, please. It's enough. It's enough. Okay? Thank you. But yeah, that's all I have for this episode. If you disagree with me or you just had some thoughts that I didn't bring up, because once again, I'm a white woman talking about a black woman in this film, so there are bound to be things that I missed. Please leave them in the comments. I'd love to have a discussion. And as always, you can follow the podcast and myself. All the socials will be linked below in the description. And until next time, stay fat and fabulous. Bye.